Our clients were very interested in architecture. They had traveled the world. They're very outgoing, gregarious people, a lot of personality. And an architecture that had that kind of enthusiasm to it was this Italian style. In that, there was a wonderful opportunity, because we love that style of architecture, but also the challenge of how to do that well or authentically in Minnesota. As we do with all of our projects, we really want to become a student of that style and not just assume we know it. And you want to become highly knowledgeable of what that is so that you can then take that and manipulate that and perform in that, but also bend it to what you want it to be and still stay faithful to that architecture. With this larger property that we have, what we wanted to do was create a sylvan park-like setting with the trees, the landscape, and having the Italian home very much integrate into the land. Where the house ends and the land begins is a very blended spot, a very beautiful connection and interwoven between the two. The land was really important to us to develop it, enrich it, create that Italian kind of garden, and let the house interact with that. It's a very bucolic setting. Peaceful with the trees and the lawns that are around us. So it just has this wonderful, almost pastoral sense about the area. So to execute this classical aesthetic, it has to have that sense of weight and permanence so it feels like it's always been here and can always be here. You do that with that kind of depth. You passage through these colonnades. There's true thickness to that. The window depth is there where the stone gets carved back to the window. The balconies have the brackets and the profiles and the balustrades. All of it reveals substance. All of it reveals that depth. Celebrating the very simplest things in architecture with that sense of weight and what it means to hold something up. When we do that too, then we also get great play with light, because daylight doesn't really do anything until we start to have a vessel for that light. So shade and shadow, how light hits a profile, how it disappears around a corner, how it gradates around a curve, all of that starts to express the architecture. So the architecture is really a play with light. Besides the concepts, the details had to be done in a way that was also authentic, and we had to celebrate those as well. So the front of the house has this great balance to it, where we have a weighted end at both ends with the balconies and the two wings, so to speak. In the center is this large 1.5-story height opening called a portico. And that typically is just deep enough to create a sense of entry. But here the owner wanted to create that more gracious and more inviting space and really be a place that they could inhabit. So now it evolves into a word called loggia, which is a defined arcade that's used for inhabiting and living in. And so that front was a great inspiration to come in and have that invitation. So this house had a little bit more relaxed feel. Even though it's substantial overall in its aesthetic, it's still a very gracious and calm presence there. What you're going to start to see all through the house is that marriage between that kind of fun exuberance of the interior furnishings and the artwork compared to that more substantial, even sobering type of architecture. When they're combined, they create a wonderful tension and excitement together. So the house was conceived around this grand salon, this atrium space with the skylight above. And that fed into something that we believe in a lot, which is the hierarchy of spaces, where there is a served and servant expression of rooms and spaces. So this main space with its volume, its light, its huge connection to the outdoors is wrapped around with smaller spaces of importance, but of a scale that's different, such as the kitchen, the family space, offices, the entry. And those spaces are hiding around those edges, behind those hallways and those loggias. And they're looking into this main space. They're borrowing the light, they're borrowing that sense of scale, so they work in tandem with each other to create a much more symbiotic feel. The architecture on the outside does not stop on the outside, but the architecture is executed on the interior as well. All of the large pilasters, the balustrade, go to the top of the columns, and you have the entablature at the top, all creating indoor room in a way that's very much like how the architecture on the outside is thought about. In this main space of the Grand Salon with the skylight, we knew that that would be a challenge because we would probably load the house with too much heat and really actually too much light. 15 to 18,000 foot candles that could come from the sky directly if we didn't start to filter it or screen it down. That skylight has a lot of technology on it. It has a ceramic frit on it which brings that light down to about 15% of the foot candles that would be in the sky. That allows us to be in here in this space, feel like it's daylight filled, but be able to sit down, have a conversation, read a book, and not feel like you're going to have to chase for the shade or put up an umbrella. This is really kind of wonderfully indicative of the client where in this idea and this faithfulness to the Italian architecture, they still want to have that moment of surprise and that moment of being irreverent to what it is. And our client had seen a floating room, per se, and they said we need to include that somewhere in the architecture. It could not be a standalone or awkward piece that just did not match, but how do we do that in a way that felt like it was part of the home? And we realized what we had to do is the architecture of the rest of the home had to invite it or embrace it. So where it sits, we opened it up to both sides, to the family room side and the Grand Salon side, so it had a sense of that floating. We also pushed the columns away. It allowed the invitation to say, yes, we want you to be here. We're going to give you that space to hang there, to float. And we put a barrel vault over the top, allows us to build its own interior roof, have its own sky, so to speak, so the room has its own place to be. But it was invited in. It didn't fight its way into the space. The house has a pretty consistent aesthetic or personality to it, but in certain spaces, the client wanted to have a little fun and push that a little bit. In one of the offices, that was pushed to be a little bit more masculine, darker, a little hipper. It's got a sunken conversation pit in it, just to push the style around a little bit. You'll see that in other spaces as well around the home, where as we get out of the main public spaces, there gets to be more of that individual personality showing up. In that Grand Salon, we didn't want to put a fourth wall of rooms on that side. We wanted to connect back out to the outdoors. So you'll see 2 stories of glass going out to a 2-story loggia, which connects really beautifully out to that formal, extended Italian lawn that's there. It's really important to have that sense of light. You can look out, you see the trees, the sky, the landscape that's there right from the center space, which is highly important to have that sense of engagement from indoor to outdoor. What we hope when we do architecture is we're doing something that's going to be long-lasting for people to enjoy for a very long time. So it has a sense of sustainability in the sense that it's not being remodeled or torn down, but it's there in a way that's being loved and taken care of and would be a good neighbor. And if we can do that, that really is something that we think is a great success.